All right, boys and girls, let's go over some stuff with conclusions. So first things first, when it comes to writing a good lab conclusion, the very first thing you should always be working on is restating your results. This means you're going to write phrases like, we recovered blank grams of benzoic acid. This means we had a whatever percent recovery of this compound. Okay, so these are like the factual statements from the lab itself. Okay, you always want to be as specific as possible, which means write quantitative things. Okay, qualitative things are not super helpful when it comes to a lab conclusion. Saying, oh, the compound was white is not very useful. But you could put something in there with, along the lines of, when we started, these crystals were very, very tiny, very brittle, looked more like a powdery substance, and at the end, our crystals were super shiny and they were really long, whatever observations you may have seen. Okay, so I'm not saying observations have no place in a conclusion. What I'm saying is, just saying we recovered a white solid is not helpful, right? Because that's something you would have been given in the original document. Saying these crystals came out super long and super fluffy, which is exactly what we were going for, that's a better way to describe that, okay? So that's the first thing you need to do. The next thing we need to do is actually discuss what those numbers mean. Okay, saying I recovered 1.07 grams of the compound really isn't useful unless you give it some context, right? So think context here. You had 107% recovery if you got that amount recovered, okay? Are you supposed to have greater than 100% recovery? No. Are you supposed to have negative percent recoveries? No. Something happened, okay? In those types of experiments, something happened, and that's okay. You're not out to get the perfect result in this type of an experiment. It's a learning experience for a reason, right? If I wanted you to get the exact result every single time, I would tell you that's what I wanted. That's not what the goal of this was. Now, what are some things that we can actually talk about as far as context here? Okay? If we got a larger percent recovery than we expected, we can say we must have run into an error. And the last part of your conclusion is going to be talking about those errors. But you should kind of hint at, I know that this is not what I was supposed to get here, right? I know what I got is not what the goal was. Okay? Yes?
I don't know if you said this or not yet, but if you're going to talk about that, what would be our aimed goal somewhat? So how would you know if you got
Oh, that's a good question. So what was the goal of this particular experiment? What's the optimum number that you wanted? Right. We wanted 100%. We wanted 100% of our compound recovered. However, not knowing anything about the compound itself that I gave you, you don't know what percentage of that particular jar, right, has impurities in it. You have no idea. You have no context for this thing should have given you a 20% error, right? 20% of this is not benzoic acid. I didn't tell you that, okay? I assume this is pure benzoic acid with no impurities, so you should have gotten a 100% recovery. And that is a fair assumption to make on this type of an experiment. But that's a good question. This is also a good place for, the context is, we expected 100%, but we got 85, or we got 95, right? And that's then where we're going to lead into our error analysis. One thing I never want to see, human error. This tells me nothing. This tells me humans were involved, which I already knew, okay? I want specifics. I want very specific errors when you talk about human error, you talk about an experiment. In this type of an experiment, where are some of the errors going to come from? Just start listing them.
Measurements.
Measurement where?
Using different scales may not be the same.
Using the balance. If you didn't tear the balance, if you didn't hit 0 before you put your thing on there, go ahead.
How long the crystals will boil, do you want?
Sure. Boiling time. Variation. Good. Say again?
Measuring the benzoic acid.
Yeah, so using the balance, good one. Okay, what else?
Getting all of benzoic acid after boiling.
Losing benzoic acid. Loss of compound. And you can say at filter phase, you can say you lost some at transfer to the Erlenmeyer, right? What else can we say?
After boiling and leaving it sit, you had to cover it to prevent dust. Something could have gotten
Forgetting to cover it while it was cooling could have caused any kind of impurity to enter. I like it. What else?
Different weighing papers.
Okay. Weigh paper impurity. You can come up with probably about 100 different ways where impurities might have entered. Was your glassware super clean? Having watched many of you do dishes, I can tell you your glassware was not clean enough. Putting you on blast there. You haven't been trained to clean dishes the right way, as far as speakers are concerned. Don't take it personally, okay? But you can come up with a lot of different ways. Having brainstormed for all of 30 seconds with you, we came up with several, right? You can come up with a ton of different locations in your specific experiment. So be specific to the experiment when you're writing a conclusion. Do not just say, human error, the balance was wrong, right? Be specific. Say things like, when weighing benzoic acid on this balance, the benzoic acid was hard to control, so some of it may have escaped from the weigh paper. That is a more specific statement than, I weighed it wrong. Do we understand? Okay, I want you working on these in class today. I want them done before the end of class today. Because I'm going to grade this by the end of the week. I want to see what you have to write because I want to give you feedback on it. Yes?
Would temperature also affect this?
Yeah, temperature. I mean, you can come up with 100 of them. And I'm okay with you coming up with as many as you feel necessary to address. Do not feel like if you don't get every single one, I'm going to give you, I'm going to come after you.
Really?
Be as specific to your specific experiment as you can, right? What's an acceptable number of ways to talk about this experiment?
2.
I would say minimum 3, 4. I would say minimum 4 errors that you need to discuss, right? Pick the big ones that you think really affected the outcome of your experiment and write about those. And that's the last part of your conclusion. That is not what you start with, okay? Please go back and read.
So just 80% sound like.
Yeah. As long as your value is somewhere between, like, I would say 50 and 100%, you're pretty solid.
Can you take a picture of this in the lab?
Your calculation? No, you could just look right.
Where is the lab? Is
In
it not
OneNote?
in the-
It didn't show. Where is it? Go to handouts. So it's at that one.